אנחנו מוצאים את הספור עם זרה שמשון.
האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה? כן. מה? כן.
Erev Tov and good evening, everyone. We're in the Zera Shimshon on Parsha Shmini. We're going to do Os Vav, section number 6. Before we do, we're going to take a look at a few psukim from the Parsha. This is Parsha Shmini, sefer Vayikra, Perek Yud, psukim Ches through Yud. And it's talking about the prohibition that we see in the Torah in this week's Parsha for Kohanim to drink wine or intoxicating beverages when they're going to do the avoda, and we'll see also and when they're going to instruct the people about certain laws. So let's take a look at that right now. Vayedaber Hashem el Aharon lemor, and Hashem spoke to Aharon saying, Yayin v'sheichar al teisht, wine and old wine you should not drink. Ata uvanecha, you and your sons itoch with you. Bevo achem el ohel moed, when you come in to the tent of meeting. Velo samusu, and then you won't die. If you guard this prohibition and you refrain from drinking wine when you come in, when Kohanim come in to do the avoda, then you won't die. Ukas olam ledorosechem, this is an eternal statute for your generations. Next pasuk, ula havdil bein hakodesh uvein hachol, and to separate between the holy and the secular, uvein hatame uvein hatahor, and between the impure and between the pure. Which means when the Kohanim are dealing with korbanos and sacrifices and ritual laws, and they have to make distinctions and draw distinctions between something that is impure and pure, and something that's holy and fit to be brought as a korban, and something that's profane and not fit to be brought as a korban, they also are not allowed to be intoxicated at that time, and should refrain from drinking wine at that time as well when they have to make those determinations. So let's take a look at the Zera Shimshon, who is not going to quote that pasuk, but it's clear, as you'll see in a moment, when he brings in a piece from the Medrash Yalkut Shimoni, that he is connecting it to that those psukim that we looked at. So let us begin. Os Vav, section 6. The Medrash Yalkut Shimoni. Tanya, it was taught, Seder Havdolos Ketzad, the order of separations, how does it go? What is the order of separations? Now it continues, Hamavdil bein Kodesh lechol, to separate between what is holy and what is profane or what is secular. Bein or lechoshech, between what light and darkness. Bein Yisrael la'amim, between Bnei Yisrael and between the nations of the world. Bein Yom Hashvi l'sheish yemei hamaseh, between the seventh day, the day of Shabbos, and the 6 days of work that precede the Shabbos. Bein Tomei l'tohor, between that which is impure and that which is pure. Bein mayim ha'elyonim latachtonim, between the upper waters and the lower waters. Bein kohanim lilevim v'Yisrael, and between the kohanim and the Leviim and the other members of the Jewish people who are not kohanim and not Leviim and are Yisraelim. Ad kan l'shono, until here is a quote from the Yalkut Shimoni. So obviously, when we think about the language that we use in making Havdalah on Motzei Shabbos, or when a Shabbos goes out, when a Yom Tov goes out, a part of this statement in the Yalkut Shimoni set will sound familiar. The first 4 Havdalos, so to speak, the first 4 distinctions that are drawn here appear in our Havdalah, but after that, the ones that go after that, between the upper water, between the pure and the impure, the upper water and the lower water, between the Kohanim and Leviim and Yisraelim, those distinctions do not appear in our Havdalah, but nonetheless, the Zera Shimshon wants to focus on what's going on with this statement in the Medrash. So he says, Signon ha-Medrash kach hu. The style of this Medrash is as follows. Hashta dechazinon havdalah bein kodesh lechol. Now that we see that there is a separation between the holy and the profane, al korchach tzarech lios gam havdalah bein or lechoshech. Then we are compelled to say that there is also a separation between light and dark. V'chol hamedrash sovei v'holech al seder zeh. And all of this statement taken in this excerpt from the Yalkut Shimoni follows this same order. In other words, the Zera Shimshon is saying that the Yalkut Shimoni is not just listing different types of distinctions. The Yalkut Shimoni is saying that each one of the distinctions leads to and brings about, in a way, the next distinction. And then so too from the second to the third, and the third to the fourth, and the fourth to the fifth, etc. So these distinctions that are listed here are all connected, and each one causes the one or brings about the one after it. And now he's going to explain exactly how that works. Next paragraph. V'hainu, and this means dimitchila hivdil hakadosh baruch hu bein kodesh lechol. From the very beginning of the creation of the world, Hashem separated between that which was holy and that which was secular or profane. Kidi omrinon, as we say in Medrash Rabbah, Bereshis Rabbah, mitachilas brioso shalom, from the beginning of the creation of the world, Sofa HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem foresaw ma'asehem shel tzadikim u'rishayim, the very different actions and activities of the righteous people that would live in the world and the wicked people that would live. Hashem foresaw that there were going to be both tzaddikim and rishayim in this world that he was creating, and that their actions were going to be very different from each other. Mishum hachi, and because of this, bara shnei olamos, he created two worlds. La tzaddikim ha'olam haba, he created the next world that we refer to, the entirely spiritual world that we refer to as olam haba, the coming world, or the next world. He created that for the tzaddikim. V'la rishayim ha'olam hazeh, and for the wicked he created this world. So the Zera Shimshon starts by telling us that the very first distinction quoted in the Medrash of Hamavdil bein Kodesh Lechol, Hashem separates between the holy and the secular. That is how the world, that distinction was present at the very first moment of Brias Olam, of the creation of the world. Why? Because since Hashem foresaw that the world was going to have both righteous people and wicked people, he decided right then from the beginning that there would be two primary worlds for these different types of people, Olam Haba for the Tzadikim and Olam Hazeh for the Rishoyim. And that's what is meant by Hamavdil bein Kodesh Lechol. Hashem separated between those two worlds. Next paragraph. V'chevan di'ikat tzadikim v'rishoyim, and since Hashem started with distinguishing these two worlds, one for the righteous and one for the wicked, al korchoch tzarech havdalah bein or lechoshech, then Hashem was compelled, so to speak, haviyochol, to make a distinction between light and darkness, between or and choshech. Kidamrin and b'medrash, as we say also in the Medrash Rabbah, Ro'ah she'ein ha'olam ro'oi lehishtamesh la'oro. Hashem saw that this world was not an appropriate place for people to be able to use the light that Hashem created on the first day. Omad ugenazo latzadikim la'asid lavo. So Hashem stood, so to speak, and he set aside and hid the special light that he created on the first day for use of the tzaddikim la'asid lavo in the future, meaning in the world to come. Bizehu, and this is what the pasuk means, Vayar Elokim es ha'or, and Hashem saw the light, ki tov, that it was good. Vayavdel Elokim bein ha'or uvein ha'choshech, and Hashem separated between the light and between the dark. It's very important for us to realize that what the Zera Shimshon is talking about here and referring to is not the separation between the sun during the day and the absence of the sun and therefore darkness at night, which is the way we normally understand the idea of Hashem separating between the light and the darkness. The Zera Shimshon is saying the light that Hashem created in the beginning had nothing to do with the sun, because the sun wasn't yet created until a later day. And therefore, this was a special light that Hashem created. And hypothetically, this light could have been used and benefited from and enjoyed by every inhabitant of the world. But Hashem, again, foresaw the actions of the Rishoyim and decided that this was not a light that the Rishoyim in Olam Hazeh, in this world, could be allowed to benefit from. And it wouldn't be appropriate for them to have access to this light and to experience this light. So he took that light and set it aside and separated it from this world and set it aside for the enjoyment of the righteous and the tzaddikim in the next world. So therefore, again, to make the point very clearly, when, according to the Zera Shimshon, when it says Hamavdil bein Kodesh lechol, that's referring to separating out the two worlds of Olam Hazeh versus Olam Haba. And the next statement of bein or lechoshech, between light and darkness, is between the light of the special light that was set aside for tzaddikim in the Olam Haba versus the lack of having that light, the absence of that particular special supernal light in this world. Of course, that doesn't mean there's no light in this world. There's the light of the sun, and we'll get to that, and we'll see how that's addressed as we go forward. Next paragraph. V'chevon de'ika havdola bein or lechoshech, and since there is a separation between this light that is only for Olam Haba and the absence of this light called darkness in this world, al korchach tzorech liyo shemesh v'yareach. Therefore, this compelled Hashem, so to speak, to create a sun and a moon. Kidda Amar HaKosav, as the pasuk in Tehillim says, l'cho yom af l'cho loylo. You have the day and you even have the night. Mipnei shegozor HaKodesh Baruch Hu sheyeh yom v'layla. Because Hashem decreed that in this world, Olam Hazeh, there would also be a situation of light and absence of light, of light, v'choshech, and of darkness, even though the original or that he had created would not be part of this world at all. So therefore, even in Olam Hazeh, in our world, our physical material world, there's a light and a darkness, and that is, of course, symbolized by the sun and the moon. Dehainu or v'choshech, and this day and night are called light and darkness. Mishum hachi tzarech liyos nami ma'or v'shemesh. And therefore, there needs to be a ma'or, a luminary at night, v'shemesh, and the sun. So we have the moon, which is the night luminary, and we also have the sun. And the Zera Shimshon continues, next paragraph, uchesheyesh yoreach v'shemesh. And once you have a moon and a sun, yesh hevdel bein Yisrael la'umos. This leads to the distinction between Bnei Yisrael and the nations of the world. The Amrinun b'Medrash Yalkut, because we say in another statement in the Medrash Yalkut Shimoni, al pasuk, on the pasuk from Bereshis, v'limshol bayom uvalayla, that the luminary should have dominance at day and night. Derech Eretz, so the Medrash comments, it is the proper way, Godol Monet La Godol, the older one, the bigger one, meaning the older son, and this is a reference to Esav, should calculate his calendar based on the larger of the luminaries, meaning the sun. So Esav has a solar-based calendar. V'koton, and the younger son, a reference, of course, to Yaakov Avinu, Mone lakoton, he should make his counting and his calculations of his calendar based on the smaller luminary, and that's the moon, and that's a lunar calendar. Ma chama zo sholetis bayom velo balayla. The sun appears during the day and does not appear at night. Kach Esav yesh lo chelek ba'olam hazeh. So too Esav has a portion in this world, ve'ein lo chelek la'olam haba, and he does not have a portion in the next world. Uma halavona sholetes bayom uvalayla, and the moon, which has a dominance, meaning it has an appearance both during the day and at night. Of course, we see the moon at night when it is in its periods of being seen, but we can also see the moon sometimes during the day. Kach Yisrael yeshlam chelek v'olam hazeh uva olam haba. So too Bnei Yisrael, who have a lunar calendar and focus on the and center their calendar on the moon, they have a portion in this world and in the next world. V'zehu bein Yisrael la'amim, and this is the true meaning of Hashem separating between Bnei Yisrael and the nations of the world. So we see how each step, each distinction and separation is connected to the one that follows, and the existence of the moon, the sun and the moon lead to a distinction, a very important distinction between Bnei Yisrael and Esav, representing the Umos HaOlam, and they have a solar calendar, and we have the lunar-based calendar, and they are focused on, in their experiences are in this world, and we have our experiences both in this world and the next world. Continuing to the next page. V'hevdel zeh debein Yisrael le'umos, and this distinction between Bnei Yisrael and the nations of the world, maybe hevdel, it itself brings the next distinction, bein Yom HaShvi'i l'sheish yemei ha'maaseh, between the seventh day, Shabbos, and the 6 days of work. The Amrinan B'Sanhedrin Perek Zayin, because we say, and this is a very famous statement of Chazal from Masechah Sanhedrin, De venoach sheshavas mimolocha chayev misa. A venoach, a non-Jew, who keeps Shabbos and refrains from doing malacha that is prohibited on Shabbos, chayev misa, is obligated the death penalty. He's not rewarded. It's not a good thing for a ben Noach to keep Shabbos. He's punished for that. De azharosan zohi misasan. And their warning in the Torah, that brings with it a death penalty, meaning for Bnei Noach, the fact that the Torah prohibits something, and it makes a statement that something is prohibited for them to do, that automatically means that they will be chayev misa if they do it. V'livnei Noach ein hevdel ben yom hashvi l'sheish yemei ha'maaseh. And therefore, for Bnei Noach, for non-Jews, there is no distinction between the day of Shabbos and the other days of the week. They're not allowed to keep Shabbos, so therefore all of the days should be considered working days, days when they do malacha. There should be no day for Bnei Noach to refrain, to call a Shabbos and rest and refrain from doing malacha. Ve'asi shapir, and now we can say that it comes very nicely, the diek lomar yom hashvi l'sheish yemei ha'maaseh, that the Yalkut Shimoni was very precise in its language, and it said the separation between the seventh day and the 6 days of doing action, meaning of doing malacha, v'lo ka'amar bein Shabbos l'chol, and it did not use the phrase a distinction between Shabbos and weekdays. That could have been a phrase that the Yalkut used to distinguish between Shabbos and weekdays, but instead it wanted to emphasize this point of malacha and having a day of refraining from malacha versus which is the Bnei Yisrael situation, and not having a day of refraining from malacha, which is the Bnei Noach situation. Now the Zera Shimshon moves to the next havdalah, the next distinction. The hashta the ikka chiluk. And now that there is a distinction and a difference between Yom HaShvi'i v'chulei, between the 7th day and the 6 days of doing malacha, yesh hevdel nami bein tamei l'tohor. This leads us to the next separation between that which is impure and that which is pure. The chol mine ruchos hatuma, because all types of impure forces, nitmarin b'Shabbos, they are reduced, they lose their power on Shabbos. The od, and another point, the amrinon b'sota, the Chazal teach us in Maseches Sota, hatahara notla tam haperos v'es hareach. The purity, meaning the fact that the laws of purity were not kept carefully. So the existence of laws and halachos about purity, about tahara, so the existence of those laws and the fact that at certain points they were not kept, notla tam haperos v'sareach, this took away the flavor of fruits and the fragrance of fruits. So when the laws of purity were kept and followed meticulously, the fruits had a special flavor and a special fragrance that was lost when the laws of tahara, the rules and procedures of purity, were no longer kept as carefully. Uva Meseches Shabbos, and in Meseches Shabbos Amrinon, we say, Tavlin echad yesh lanu. We have a certain spice, V'Shabbos Shema, and Shabbos is its name. The spice is called Shabbos. Kol ha-meshamer es ha-Shabbos, everyone who keeps Shabbos, nehene mimenu, benefits from this spice. When they eat the food, when they eat their food on Shabbos, if they keep Shabbos, then they can taste a special quality in the food. V'savlan shel Shabbos reicho nodef, and this spice of Shabbos, its fragrance is penetrating, is powerful. Mipnei shebo bayom shavsu hamazikin min ha'olam, because it is specifically on the day of Shabbos that the mazik and the impure forces and powers are put to rest forcibly. They are powerless on those days min ha'olam, from the world. So the Zera Shimshon is saying, once we have this distinction between Shabbos for Bnei Yisrael and the absence of Shabbos for the Umos HaOlam, then that also leads us naturally to the next distinction between Tameh and Tahor, because it's specifically on Shabbos that the Tameh powers of the world, the Mazikin and the Kochos Hatuma of the world, are reduced and limited and lose their power. And therefore, the tahara, there's a strength, a koach ha-tahara of purity on Shabbos, and therefore that leads to a restoration of the tam v'reach, of the flavors and fragrances of things that we eat, and that's symbolized by the tavlin that Chazal talk about, the tavlin shel Shabbos, the spice called Shabbos, and that makes the food that we eat, the aroma of the food and the taste of the food on Shabbos, particularly delicious and particularly powerful. Next paragraph. V'hatam shehatara notla hatam v'hareach. The reason that the absence of keeping the laws of purity took away the flavor and the fragrance of fruit and certain edible items, mipnei shebehayosenu timeim, because when we are tameh, when we are impure, yesh koach leruach hatuma lishlot ba'olam. This gives strength to the impure powers in the world to rule in the world, to dominate in the world. Ume'ata sheyesh hevdel bein Shabbos lechol b'minei tavshil. And now that there's a distinction, as the Zera Shimshon just explained, between Shabbos and the days of the week in terms of the foods that we eat, berecha v'taman, in terms of their fragrance and their flavor, yodanu kama hevdel yesh bein tuma latara. This teaches us the distinctions between, the distance between tuma and tara, that which is pure and that which is impure. She'ibadnu bishvil tumasenu, because we realize that we lost because of our impurity and our lack of keeping all of the laws of Tara, of purity, tam haperos, we lost the taste of that the fruits once had. V'kevan de'ike hevdel bein tamei l'tohor. We're moving to the bottom paragraph. And since there is a distinction between impurity and purity, ika hevdel bein mayim ha'elyonim lemayim hatachtonim. This leads us to the next distinction between the upper waters and the lower waters. Of course, upper waters and lower waters, that concept we see in Bereshis and Brios HaOlam, when it says that Hashem separated between the water that was above the rakia, above the firmament that he created, and below the firmament, the rakia, that he created. So the water above is called the Mayim Elyonim, the upper waters, and the water below is called the lower waters. Shahashamayim hu kulo makom tara. The Shamayim, the heavenly world, is a place of absolute purity. V'ha'aretz hu makom chet v'tuma. And the land, which is our world, the material world, olam hazeh, that's a place of sin and impurity. Vehine, and behold, kiluso shel hakodesh baruch hu, praising Hashem, ole bein mimayim hatachtonim, comes up from both the lower waters, uvein, next column, top of the next column, mimayim ha'elyonim, and also from both the lower waters and the upper waters. K'dichsiv, as the pasuk in Tehillim says, mikolos mayim rabim. Hashem is praised from the sounds of many waters. And the Zera Shimshon saying, what does it mean, many waters? Meaning from not just the upper waters, which are above the firmament and are the heavenly waters, but also the earthly waters that are called Mayim Tachtonim. They are also involved. The sounds of those waters are considered praises of Hashem. V'noda, next paragraph, and it is known, Shahamayim hatachtonim lo parshu mimayim ha'elyonim. The lower waters did not separate from the upper waters, ela mitoch bechia, only through crying, meaning that the waters that had to be separated, that Hashem separated at the time of Brias HaOlam from the upper waters, and he separated some of the waters and compelled them, so to speak, to come down to the world as we know it, to the earth. That took place through crying. The lower waters did not wish to be separated and to come down to our world. Shenamar, as it states in Eov, mi bechi neharos chibesh. From crying, through crying, the rivers were formed. When Hashem formed the rivers, according to this pasuk in Eov, crying took place. Why did crying take place? We're going to read that. We're going to find out exactly as we continue in this paragraph. Ki de'isa b'Bereshis Rabbah, as it states in the Medrash Rabbah on Bereshis, al pasuk yikavu hamayim, on the pasuk that talks about the waters gathering into the oceans and the seas and revealing the dry land. On that pasuk, it says, "Shahayu mispachadim laredis bimkom tuma." The waters that ultimately became the mayim, the lower waters, the mayim hatachtonim, those waters did not wish to descend to such an impure place as the world, as our world. Pen lo yuchlu od lekalish lahakadosh baruch hu, lest if they did so, they would no longer be able to praise Hashem. K'moshe osim hamayim ha'elyonim, as the upper waters do. Shehem bimkom kedusha, they are in a place of sanctity. The kiluso shel hakadosh baruch hu, and the praise of praising of Hashem, eino ola, it does not arise, ella, it doesn't ascend, ella mimkom tara, except from a place of purity. So the waters that were designated to become the Mayim HaTachtonim, the lower waters, and fill our oceans and seas and be down here in our world, thought we that's a terrible thing. We don't want that, because then we'll be in an impure place and we won't be able to continue praising Hashem. We won't be able to praise Hashem. And since Hashem promised them, that forever the salt that would come from the seas, the lower water of our world, would be able to sweeten the meat and give a nice flavor in the meat. Ve'od, and another thing Hashem promised them, sheyu kravim al kol hakarbonos, that the salt that comes, the sea salt that comes from the oceans and the seas, would also be brought and offered on all of the sacrifices. Vehu habris melach, and this is what the Torah refers to. Vehu habris melach ha'omor b'Torah, and this is what the Torah refers to as the covenant of salt, where the Torah articulates a mitzvah to put salt on all of the different types of korbanos. Oz nisratu, then the water that was going to be consigned to this world, the Mayim, and become the Mayim HaTachtonim, was appeased and agreed to come down, because it realized that it would not be impure, would not be considered tameh, and it would produce the salt that would be able to give a proper, strong flavor to meat. And we talked about how flavor represents, strong flavor and good fragrance represents tahara, purity, and also how the salt would be used on all the korbanos. And Hashem, of course, would only use the salt on all the korbanos if the source of the salt, meaning the oceans and the seas, the Mayim HaTachtonim, would be considered a pure, coming from a place of purity. Vikoshe, and there's a question. Hey, next paragraph. Heyach mipnei zeh levad nisratzu lifrosh mimakom ha'elyon. How is it that just for this reason the water was appeased and agreed to be separated from the upper waters? Why was this so important? Ela lefi shekol pachad shelahem hoya. But we need to understand that all of the fear from the water was pen yistamu afheim kimo haaretz, that they would become impure, just like the world we live in. The abdu zechusam, and they would lose their merit lezamer lehakodesh baruch hu, to sing to Hashem. Lachein, therefore, kishishamu shela olam yimatku v'yitnu tam b'basar. Therefore, when they heard that they would always be able, the salt that came from the water would always be able to give a flavor in meat. Oz parshu, then they agreed to separate. Shezel lahem laos emes, because this was considered by the water to be a true sign, shelo yistamu, that they would not become defiled, they would not become impure. Yesh atara, yesh tamva peros, as the Zera Shimshon explained before. When there's purity, then the flavor of the fruits is restored. The flavor of the things we eat in this world are restored. V'zehu disninan, and this is what we learned in a Mishnah in Maseches Kelim. Kol shebayom tahor, something that is made from all of the creatures in the sea is tahor, meaning it cannot be makabel tuma. It doesn't receive tuma. So imagine that you take fish or other sea creatures and you use their skin to create a type of vessel or receptacle. Even if those vessels or receptacles touch something tameh, those items don't become tameh. Kol shebayam tahor. Anything that comes from the is made from the sea creatures in the ocean is not makabel tuma, doesn't become tameh. Ve'od, and more so, sha'adarabba, just the opposite. Not only do these items not become tameh, but even more so, hamayim mitari mesatemeim. Water is the thing that brings tahara, that purifies things that are tameh. So water has the power to be mitaher, to bring purity and to purify things that are tameh, that are impure. Umishum hachi yecholim lekales gamheim, and therefore the lower waters are able to praise Hashem and continue praising Hashem even after they were separated from the Mayim Elyonim, from the upper waters, and even after they came down to our impure world. Next paragraph. V'hashda dechazinon de'ein kilusa shel makom ole elimimkom tahara. And now that we see that praise for Hashem can only arise and come up and ascend from a pure place, al korchech tzarech lomar, then we're compelled to talk about the next distinction. Shemishamshov trichim liyos tahorim v'nivdolim mikol tuma. Then we know that those who serve Hashem, those human beings and individuals who serve Hashem in a special way in this world, need to be tahor, need to be pure, and need to be separated from tuma, from impurity. Dehakohanim shluchei derachmona, because the Kohanim are considered the special messengers of Hashem in terms of the work that they do in the Beis HaMikdash. They are Hashem's messengers to do the avodah, the temple service. And just like the Kohanim have to be separated from Tuma, from impurity, because of their avodah, their work in the Beis HaMikdash, koch haLevim, so to the Levim, tzrichim liyos muvdalim. They need to be separated also from Tuma, from impurity, machmas duchonam, because of their service of singing on the platforms that were set up for them to sing from in the Beis HaMikdash. That was one of the roles of the Leviim in the Beis HaMikdash, was to sing special songs to accompany the avodah, the work that the Kohanim were doing in the korbanos. Ve'elu ochlim truma, ve'elu meiser. And these, the Kohanim, eat truma, that's their special food, ve'elu meiser, and the Leviim eat meiser rishon, the tithe, the 10th of the produce, v'chulhu mishulchan gavoa zachu, and all of them, meaning the Kohanim and the Leviim, they merited to receive food and portions from shulchan gavoa, from the high up table, meaning the table of Hashem. Hashem is the one who designated that the Kohanim would receive truma and also other gifts of things that they could eat and benefit from, and that the Leviim would receive meiser and that's only true of the Kohanim and the Leviim. That's not true of Yisraelim. So that explains the very last distinction, that there's a separation and a distinction between Kohanim and Leviim and between Yisraelim, in the sense that the Kohanim and Leviim have to maintain the laws of tahara, of purity, to be able to eat their truma, and also to be able to serve in the Beis HaMikdash, and those rules do not apply in general to the Yisraelim, who did not receive any special gifts of food items from Hashem in the same way that the Kohanim and the Leviim did. So the Zera Shimshon has taken us step by step through each of the levels of distinctions that the Yalkut Shimoni, that the Medrash Yalkut Shimoni articulated, and he has elucidated each one and shown how each one of the distinctions, leads to the next distinction. It's not just, he wanted to teach us that it's not just a kind of list where there are no connections. It's not just a random listing, but rather a very specific list from top to bottom, from the earliest distinction that was made when Hashem created the world, and his distinction between Tameh and Tahor, and then leading step by step by step by step, all the way down to the distinctions between Kohanim and Leviim and Yisraelim that exists amongst the Jewish people. Yasher koach to joining us this week in the Zera Shimshon. We look forward to learning together again in the Zera Shimshon next week.